On the other hand, expectation maximization algorithm can be used for the latent variables, variables that are not directly observable and are actually inferred from the values of the other observed variables, right? In order to predict their values with the condition that the general form of probability distribution governing those latent variables is known to us. The algorithm is actually at the base of many unsupervised clustering algorithms in the field of machine learning, right? So we can use this EM algorithm with a number of unsupervised clustering algorithms. So here is the main steps of the EM algorithm. We have given a set of incomplete data. Consider a set of starting parameters, right? So initially we don't have complete or fully observable data set. So we have an incomplete data set, and we will be performing two different modes on it as we discussed earlier. One is the expectation step or the E step, and the other is the maximization step or the M step. So the E step is using the observed available data of the data set and estimates the values of the missing data. So depending upon the available observed data, it basically makes a guess of for the values, for the missing values of the data. And the M step completes the data generated after the E step is used in order to update the parameters. So the update of the parameters is being performed in the M step based on the values which are being generated in the E step. And then we basically repeat these two steps, step number 2 and step number 3, until we reach to a convergence. So this is basically a visualization of the E step and the M step. So in E steps, we are basically guessing the values for the latent variables, or you can say that we are updating the variables, and then we are providing this to the M step. M step is basically estimating the model parameters based on the variables which are estimated here, and this process is basically being continued one after the other until we reach the convergence. The essence of expectation maximization algorithm is to use the available observed data of the data set to estimate the missing data, and then using that data to update the values of the parameters. So let's have a little bit more explanation of the EM algorithm. So it basically explains these two steps which I explained in the previous slide. Initially, a set of initial values of the parameters are considered. A set of initial observed data is given to the system with the assumption that the observed data comes from a specific model. The next step is known as expectation or E step. In this step, we use the observed data in order to estimate or guess the values of the missing or incomplete data. It is basically used to update the variables, right? So this is the same step which I explained in the E step in the previous slides. Now the next step we know now that is the maximization step or the M step, and in this step we complete the data generated from the previous step in the expectation step. So we use this data to update the values of the parameters or the model hypothesis. Now in the fourth step, it is checked whether the values are converging or not. So we are basically checking the convergence. So if the convergence is being performed, then we can stop. Otherwise, we need to repeat the E step and the M step again and again until we reach the convergence. So this is a very simple flowchart of the EM algorithm. We have some initial values here, and we have two modes here. One is E step and the other is M step, and then we continuously check the convergence. So if there is no convergence, we need to repeat these two modes, and if we reach to a convergence, we need to stop our algorithm. So here is an example. We can use the application of EM algorithm to Gaussian mixed models, right? So first, let's contrive a problem where we have a data set where points are generated from one or two Gaussian processes. So we have one or two Gaussian processes which are basically generating some data points. The points are one-dimensional. The mean of the first distribution is 20 and the mean of the second distribution is 40. So we have two distributions with a mean of 20 and 40, and both these distributions have a standard deviation of 5. Now we can draw 3000 points from the first process and 7000 points from the second process, and we can mix both of these points. We can then make a histogram of the points to have an intuition of the data set. We expect to see a bimodal distribution with the peak of each of the means of the two distributions. So you know that histogram is basically the frequencies of the points which are being occurred, right? So when we draw the histogram from these points, we can expect to see a bimodal distribution, and the peaks will be where we have the means of the two distributions, right? So you can generate these two processes, and you can generate these different data points through this simple example. And when you will plot this example, you will see that a histogram will be generated, and this histogram is basically telling the frequency of the frequency of occurring of each data point. And you have seen that we have the means of the two different samples which we have calculated already. So running the example creates the data set and then creates a histogram plot of the data points. The plot clearly shows the expected bimodal distribution with a peak for the first process around 20, and for the second process we have a peak around 40. We can see that for many of the points in the middle of the two peaks, that is ambiguous as to which distribution they were drawn from. So the middle points will be ambiguous because they are in the middle of the two peaks. We can model the problem of estimating the density of the data set by GMM, right? So a Gaussian we have used for this example here, I wrote a scikit-learn class which uses a Gaussian mixture model, and it can estimate the parameters of the distribution, right? So you can basically use this library, and by using this library you can generate different models, and then you can test them against different data set. So there are a number of ways through which you can basically configure the model to incorporate other information which we know about the data along with the initial values. So we have an argument here with initial init parameters, and you can use this argument in order to pass the initial parameters. So I have also included some code snippets into these slides, and you can execute this code as it is to see the impact of different parameters. So we have two different processes with different data points. So in total there are 10,000 data points which we have already generated, and then we can basically use the latent variables prediction function in order to predict the values. So you can use these code examples, just try to execute it, and then you will have an understanding of the EM algorithm. So there are a number of uses of EM algorithm, like we have seen that mainly it can be used in order to fill the missing data or the unobserved samples, and it is mainly used in unsupervised learning domain in order to form clusters. And it also have its usage with hidden Markov models or HMM. It can be used in order to discover the values of the latent variables. Here are some of the advantages of the EM algorithm. It is always guaranteed that likelihood will increase with each iteration. The E step and M step are often pretty easy for other problems in terms of implementation, and the solutions to the M step often exist in the closed form. And there are also some disadvantages of EM algorithm. The first thing is that it is very slow, it is time consuming, it is resource intensive, and it leads to a slow convergence. It makes convergence to the local optima only, right? So we cannot have a convergence towards the global optima. It will also make convergence towards the local optima. It requires both the probabilities, forward and backward. Numerical optimization requires only forward probabilities. So in this case, we will require both the forward and the backward probabilities. So this was it for our expectation maximization algorithm. Hopefully you have fully understood the three algorithms which we have studied today's lecture, and hopefully you will have a very good understanding of different algorithms related to the machine learning domain. We will also have a thorough discussion in our QA session, so just go through the videos again and again, and we will discuss them also in our QA session, and we will also have a recap of our whole machine learning course in our QA session. Thank you very much.